Hi. Let's talk about the Warriors.
Musical styles are still a very important form of communication for our young people. Hi, I'm Joe Feinstein.
Dig it! Can you dig it?
I know that multiple people have already tackled this movie. Most notably, in my opinion, is Cinefix's episode of What's the Difference between the film and the original novel it's based on. I do highly recommend you check it out if you haven't already. It's a great channel and a great series, so I'll link it below. But be warned, the novel is rough, so get ready for that. Now, that being said, I absolutely love this movie to death, and I still think it's worth another re-examine. So let's see if I can bring something new to the table, shall we? It debuted in 1979 to less than favorable reactions. Though younger audiences immensely enjoyed it, it was vastly panned by the likes of Siskel and Ebert, the LA Times, and the Washington Post for portraying a romanticized version of gang life. It also didn't help that real gang fights broke out a lot at the initial theatrical opening. But like many films, it turned into a cult classic over the decades, even leading to it getting its own video game adaptation, the story of which was written by the film's own writer, Walter Hill, which we will absolutely get back to in just a moment. But first, let's break down the cast, shall we? We have Michael Beck, who only a year prior got to act alongside Meryl Streep and James Woods in the Holocaust TV miniseries. James Remar, who went on to have a wonderful TV and film career, my personal favorite being his role in Dexter. David Harris, who'd go on to have a recurring role in NYPD Blue, shout out to that fanbase wherever you may be. Deborah Van Valkenburg, who had roles in Hellstrom and Streets of Fire, another personal favorite of mine, also written by Walter Hill. Lynn Thigpen, who had great roles in Bear in the Big Blue House, All My Children, and Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. And David Patrick Kelly, who'd go on to have roles in both of the Twin Peaks TV series, as well as a fun recurring cameo in the John Wick series. But before we dive into the meat and potatoes of this movie, I want to take a moment to talk about the director, Walter Hill. He and David Shaber wrote the screenplay, and Hill spearheaded the actual shooting. It was Hill's vision and perseverance through the studio pushback that really crafted the film into what it was. From there, he'd go on to write, direct, and produce for the Alien franchise, Tales from the Crypt, and Streets of Fire. And as I mentioned a moment ago, he also wrote the story for the film's game adaptation. What's incredible about that is it not only covers the events of the film, but reveals how the Warriors formed and how each of the members came to be a part of the family, as well as giving us general information on the other gangs in this world. And that's exactly what a good game adaptation should strive to do. Cool. Now all the appetizers are covered, let's get to the main course. One of the golden rules of films is show, don't tell. It means that you should trust your audience to pick up on visual clues and character behavior and allow that to help the story flow, as opposed to relying on multiple exposition dumps. No Country for Old Men did an incredible job of doing the former, and Independence Day 2 did a sadly good job of the latter. However, I feel there should be a sub-rule to that, which should be if you have to tell. Because not everything can be solely conveyed through character behavior and visual clues, so of course you need to actually provide at least a little information. But you should never bog down your story with pace-slowing conversations that spill everything to your audience. The Warriors does an amazing job at letting the absolute minimum dialogue supplement the action and the show-don't-tell moments. The film opens with Cleon, the Warriors' leader, speaking 6 sentences, and in those 6 sentences, we not only understand what their goal is, but sets a massive stage and already gives a huge layer of mystique to the man who's calling the citywide meet.
It's still on, and we're going. Cyrus sent an emissary this afternoon to make sure. Now, Cyrus don't want anybody packed, and he don't want anybody flexing any muscle. Now, everybody says that Cyrus is the one and only. I think we better go have a look for ourselves.
Once the Warriors get to the meeting, you can feel the tension in the air, see the sweat on the gang's faces, and get a clear sense that everyone is only behaving because of the man in charge. When Cyrus finally addresses the crowd, we get an absolute sense of power and wisdom from his very first line.
Can you count, suckers? future is ours if you can count.
This moment marks the one true time a character speaks at length about anything. And sure, he does give the exposition of how many gang members there are as opposed to how many city police officers there are, but past that, he's simply talking like a warrior poet, sharing his vision for what the future could look like. And like a fucking theater tragedy, he's killed in the middle of speaking, sparking a massive panic and shredding any hope of the very future he was speaking of. Past that, the biggest piece of exposition given is at the end as to why the shooter did what he did, and he simply answers in one sentence.
Why'd you waste Cyrus?
No reason. I just like doing things like that.
Which works for two reasons. A, because of the time we have seen of him on screen, we clearly see that he's unstable and what he did is right within his wheelhouse, and B, because ultimately, it doesn't even matter why. Regardless of the reason the Warriors were put in this situation, the story was about dealing with the situation as it happened. During the journey, they do realize that they got framed, but it isn't the most pressing issue. Their main priority is simply getting back home. Past that, the characters only speak to each other in short sentences or simply give each other looks and body signals, and I think it's something that should really be replicated more often. And what I enjoy just as much as the dialogue or lack thereof is the physical world that's presented for our characters. Even before a character says a single line, the very first things we see are the Wonder Wheel and the train. The Wonder Wheel symbolizes the Warriors' home turf and where they're trying to get back to, and the train is their only way of getting home and where they spend a decent amount of time in the film. As they enter the train and we see the various gangs heading to the meet, we get a clear sense of the grimy, dirty world these characters live in. Graffiti everywhere, disgusting train corridors, no one is properly clean apart from the biggest gang in the city. Even the park where they meet is bare and rickety. They planned a thunderstorm early in the film so they could spray the streets and alleys down, and that worked on two levels. First, it gave a distinct lighting in the film that really adds a fantastic element to it, and it helps the street lights illuminate the otherwise dark streets. And also, it gives another layer of messiness that further lends to the bleak setting they wanted to set up. Hell, you could even argue it works on a third level, watching the Warriors run through town covered in rain and sweat in the myriad of multicolored low-lit streets, juxtaposed to the DJ remarking on the group's progress, bathing in a warm, dry booth in a constant color tone. There's even a second, even more blatant comparison towards the end of the film. The group is on their last stretch of the train ride, and another couple gets on, having just left some kind of school dance. The couple are in clean, fancy dress clothes, sitting right across from Swan and Mercy, who are covered in dirt and sweat. There's no dialogue, there's no flashing of weapons to try to seem tough. There's simply a moment of Mercy attempting to fix up her hair, to which Swan quietly pulls her arm back down. Without saying a word, we get a clear sense of just how both of them are feeling. Mercy feels a layer of embarrassment and a layer of still wanting to impress, and Swan is just absolutely over it. They fought for their lives for hours, and the last thing he's gonna give any energy to is a bunch of random strangers. There's a reason this movie is such a cult classic. It had passion, inspiration, and vision. And that's not even beginning to touch on the Greek epic influence or the incredible score, the best of which is the song written specifically for the movie by the Eagles guitarist and singer Joe Walsh, the very same song that Rick and Morty used for their Tales from the Citadel episode. But those are just a few bites of dessert for you after the main meal. Kinda like how Hill wanted Orson Welles to do the director's cut voiceover narration, but because the studio refused to pay for it, he just did it himself. Or how they decided to kill Vermin off because Thomas Waits, the actor, was constantly arguing with Hill on set. Or how Hill had to actually hire gangs to be extras in the film because some of the Warrior graffiti logos were sprayed over their actual gang markers and they got upset. Or how the villain drove around in a beat-up hearse, signaling his lust for death and teasing his ultimate end as a walking dead man. But you get the point. The movie is rad. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. If you have seen it, fuck it, go watch it again.
You warriors are good. Real good.
The best.
But I'm curious. What do you think?
Musical styles are still a very important form of communication for our young people. Hi, I'm Joe Feinstein.